My name is Aileen Sullivan, and I was 34 when I finally walked across the threshold of a house that was entirely mine. Not a rental, not a temporary patchwork of walls someone else owned, but mine. It took 13 years of relentless work to get here. Years of early mornings, late nights, and endless spreadsheets of savings, debts, and tiny victories. I could still feel the soreness in my shoulders, the calluses on my fingers from jobs that paid little but demanded everything. And yet, standing in that empty living room, sun streaming across the hardwood, I felt a quiet triumph. The house itself wasn't grand. The paint was slightly uneven, one floorboard squeaked just enough to announce your presence, and the kitchen faucet dripped unless you tightened it just right. But all of it bore my effort, my choices, my control. I remembered the night I found an extra $50 tucked behind a drawer and used it to fix a cracked cabinet door. That $50 wasn't just money, it was freedom. When I called my parents to share the news, I expected pride, maybe even a bit of excitement. But their voices were flat, almost rehearsed, and I caught that familiar undercurrent of obligation in my sister Amanda's tone when she asked, "Oh, so when are we coming over?" I didn't let it bother me. I had imagined this moment 1,000 times. A small housewarming, just close family, simple food, laughter over takeout containers and wine bottles. No speeches, no fanfare. Just warmth. The first to arrive was Amanda, of course, because she always claimed the early spotlight. She flopped onto the couch like she had lived here all her life, wine glass in hand, looking around like a queen surveying a new territory. "Nice place, Aileen," she said casually, stretching out her legs. "Really? You know, very you." I forced a smile. "Thanks," I said, but the tightness in my chest told me I was bracing for trouble. Amanda tilted her head, her grin that same one she'd perfected over years of getting her way. "It's funny," she said lightly. "Technically, this wouldn't exist without us." "Excuse me?" I asked, heart skipping a beat. "Oh, come on," she laughed, swirling her wine. "Remember camp, 2006? Mom and Dad covered it, gave you your first taste of independence." I froze mid-bite. That 3-week disaster of a camp where I had gotten poison ivy, slept in lumpy bunks, and learned the hard way that glue sticks are not structural support? That camp. I remembered it vividly. I had scraped together every dollar from babysitting and paper routes, and they'd added a token sum for snacks. "I paid for that mostly myself," I said carefully. Mom waved it off. "We supported you in spirit." Dad chuckled dismissively, like he'd just made a clever joke. That was my first sour note of the evening. Small, almost ignorable, but enough to remind me of the pattern. My efforts, minimized. Their role, maximized. I swallowed my irritation and reminded myself this was supposed to be peaceful. Takeout was warming on the counter, wine bottles uncorked. I told myself not to overthink. But Amanda was just warming up. As more family trickled in, the tension subtly compounded. Chairs were moved without asking, wine glasses refilled without permission, plates grabbed, and conversations monopolized. Every compliment from my parents was directed at her. The one who had dropped out of college twice, the one who had tried multiple failed ventures, the one whose financial safety net had always been my back. I smiled, nodded, and let it wash over me. This was my house. I would not let them ruin the first quiet moments of it. Later that evening, alone in my kitchen, I sank onto the cold tile. The house was silent except for the faint hum of the fridge. I ran my hands over the countertop, imagining all the years it had taken to afford this, to finally step out of the role I had been cast in. Every extra shift, every unpaid overtime, every skipped vacation, it all culminated in this. And yet, the familiar sting of family entitlement lingered like a shadow. Amanda had always been the storm to my calm. And tonight, I realized, the storm wasn't about the house itself, it was about control. For the first time, I allowed myself a quiet thought. Maybe, just maybe, I didn't have to be the caretaker, the fixer, the one who swallowed everything so everyone else could thrive. This house, these walls, this roof, they were proof that I could finally choose myself. The morning of the housewarming, I had woken up earlier than usual, the sunlight spilling across the kitchen floor and warming the hardwood like a silent congratulation. I made coffee, my hands trembling slightly with excitement and nerves. This was supposed to be simple, a quiet gathering of family, some takeout containers, a couple of bottles of wine. Nothing more. But I already knew, deep down, that Amanda would find a way to turn the quiet into chaos. She arrived first, predictably. Tossing her bag on the new couch as if she owned it, she wandered through the living room, inspecting the walls, opening doors, and peering into every closet. "Wow," she said finally, plopping onto the couch. "I have to admit, this is impressive." "Very, Aileen." I forced a smile. "Thanks. You really did all of this by yourself?" she asked, tilting her head like she was skeptical, like this accomplishment was almost too big to be true. "Yes," I said calmly, though a flash of irritation tickled the edges of my mind. Amanda sipped her wine. "I guess, technically though, this wouldn't exist without some of us," she said lightly, the casual way she spoke cutting through the quiet. "Remember summer camp, 2006? Mom and Dad helped you with that. First taste of independence." I blinked. The camp where I had endured 3 weeks of poison ivy, lumpy bunks, and sunburned shoulders? The camp I had saved almost every dollar for from babysitting and a part-time weekend job? "I mostly paid for that myself," I said slowly, tasting the words as they left my mouth. Mom waved her hand, dismissive. "We supported you in spirit." Dad chuckled, that dismissive laugh I had learned to recognize, the one that meant, "We've moved on, you should too." My chest tightened. It was the familiar pattern. My hard work minimized, their contribution magnified. Still, I kept my composure. I reminded myself of the purpose of the evening, to enjoy my house, my moment, my life. As more family arrived, the tension increased subtly, like pressure building underwater. Chairs were moved without asking, wine glasses refilled, conversations dominated. Every compliment from my parents seemed to hover in Amanda's orbit. She laughed at every small joke, leaned into every conversation, and sat like she belonged in the home I had just purchased with 13 years of my life, money, and energy. I poured myself a glass of water and stepped into the kitchen. Alone for a moment, I let the silence of the house settle around me. The walls didn't echo with judgment here. They held my effort, my labor, my independence. I sipped the water, thinking about the countless nights I had worked double shifts, skipped meals, and avoided asking for help. Every penny, every hour had led to this small victory, and yet, Amanda had already begun to overshadow it. Dinner started. Takeout containers lined the counter, the smell of warm food filling the air. I watched from the kitchen as Amanda claimed the couch like it was her throne, her new boyfriend at her side, arms draped casually across the back. My parents sat nearby, complimenting her achievements, her charm, whatever it was that made them overlook years of my work. I gritted my teeth, forcing myself to breathe. This was temporary, I reminded myself. A few hours. Then silence, then peace. But Amanda wasn't finished. Halfway through the evening, she wandered into the small study I had turned into a reading nook. "This is cute," she said, picking up a book I had collected over the years, flipping through pages as if the stories inside were public property. "You really thought of everything, huh?" "Yes," I said quietly, my voice steady, almost monotone. "I did." Amanda smiled that infuriating smile. "You've changed, Aileen," she said lightly, setting the book down. "You finally decided to take things seriously. It's kind of impressive." Her words felt like a puzzle I couldn't solve. Was it praise? Sarcasm? Condescension wrapped in admiration? I didn't respond. I had learned long ago that silence was often the clearest answer. Later, I caught my mom's eyes, a flicker of disapproval hidden beneath polite smiles. Dad leaned back in his chair, watching me with the same quiet judgment that had defined my childhood. Every small action, the way Amanda leaned back, the way she laughed at casual jokes, the way my parents' eyes followed her, was a reminder of the years I had carried the weight of everyone else's expectations. I excused myself to the kitchen, leaning against the counter as I poured another glass of water. I thought of the spreadsheets, the double shifts, the nights of instant noodles I had eaten to save money for this house. I thought of the excitement I had felt when I first held the keys, the quiet triumph of walking through empty rooms that were now mine. And I realized something important. The house wasn't just walls and a roof. It was a declaration. A declaration that I was no longer a fallback for Amanda, no longer the financial cushion, no longer the silent provider of comfort for everyone else while my own life waited on hold. Amanda came into the kitchen then, humming lightly, her wine glass half full. "You've been quiet tonight," she said, tilting her head. "Don't tell me you've changed or something." I met her gaze steadily. "I have," I said. "I've changed. And this house? It belongs to me now. Not to you, not to anyone else. Mine." Her smile faltered for a fraction of a second before she laughed lightly, dismissing the weight of my words. But I could feel it, the first crack in the armor of entitlement, the subtle shift that told me the evening would no longer be just casual. And in that moment, standing barefoot on my own kitchen floor, I understood. The night was just beginning, and the real story of this house, my house, was only just starting to unfold. After the housewarming, the quiet finally returned, but it didn't feel like peace. It felt like space I had never known, a strange kind of freedom hovering in the air, whispering that I didn't have to do everything for everyone anymore. And yet, my mind drifted back, as it always did, to the years Amanda and my parents had relied on me as if I were invisible, as if my work didn't matter. I remembered the first time Amanda had needed something, just a little, a small favor, a loan. I was 21, working part-time, barely scraping by. She had cried on the phone, her voice trembling, convinced the world had wronged her. "I just need a few hundred until my paycheck," she had said. And I, eager to help, had given her the money. No one asked me if I could afford it. No one considered that this was my rent, my bills, my survival. Then came the next time. And the next. Car insurance, dental work, credit card bills, all quietly added to the growing ledger of my life spent covering hers. Mom's voice would float through the line. "You're doing so well, Aileen. Amanda's just finding herself." Every time, her tone was soft, kind, loving, as if reminding me of my place was a compliment. But it had never felt like kindness. It had felt like a contract I hadn't signed, written in invisible ink on my shoulders. I remembered the apartment I had lived in during those years. Tiny, cramped, the radiator groaning every winter like it resented me. I had a spreadsheet taped to the fridge tracking every dollar, marking every payment, every cent saved. I had sold my guitar, cancelled streaming subscriptions, lived smaller, sacrificed small pleasures for a future that no one else respected. Even then, Amanda floated. She drifted from failed jobs to short-lived certifications, new boyfriends, retreats, and passion projects. Each time, my phone rang, a silent demand waiting for me to respond. "Can you help with rent this month?" Always phrased like a question, but really, it was an expectation. And I answered. Every single time. The night I discovered she had gone through my laptop, moving files around for some meditation session, I realized the pattern had no end. Tax records lost, bills doubled, groceries vanished, all while she lounged, claiming spiritual enlightenment. I came home exhausted, my back aching, my mind screaming, and in that moment, something snapped. I told her she had 2 weeks to move out, and for the first time, no one called me to guilt me into being kind. Mom had called anyway, but this time, I didn't pick up. Years of silence, of effort unnoticed, of sacrifices minimized, flashed before me. Every birthday missed, every vacation skipped, every extra hour worked was an invisible thread in a tapestry no one else appreciated. And yet, this tapestry, my life, my labor, was finally beginning to manifest as something tangible. My house. It was ironic, almost cruelly poetic, that Amanda had moved into my apartment just months before I finally closed on the house. 3 months of her presence, of my energy drained, of boundaries ignored, had left me counting down the days until I could reclaim my life. And reclaim it I did. I remembered that first weekend in the empty house, moving boxes alone, carrying every bag, every piece of furniture, every memory. The sweat on my back, the blisters on my hands, the ache in my legs. It all felt earned in a way that years of unrecognized work never had. I slept on the floor that first night, the mattress arriving only a day later, and it was the best sleep of my life, unburdened by calls, responsibilities, or the weight of entitlement. But even in that solitude, the echoes of the past haunted me. Amanda's calls, the subtle manipulations of my parents, the countless times I had been told, "You're doing so well," all of it lingered. I realized this house wasn't just four walls and a roof. It was a symbol of years spent fighting to exist outside of expectation, outside of being everyone's fallback. Every board, every nail, every lock on the door reminded me, this is mine, not theirs. I thought about the moment when Amanda had called months later, after my disappearance. "Your house has a spare room, right?" she had asked casually, as if the weeks of moving, the months of silence, had changed nothing. "And paying rent doesn't align with my energy." My chest had gone cold. Here it was again, the familiar sense of being expected to sacrifice. But this time, I didn't answer. I realized then that my refusal to participate wasn't cruelty, it was survival. I spent days walking through the house, unpacking, setting boundaries silently, turning every room into a personal space that wasn't up for negotiation. The spare room became a reading nook, a sanctuary. My bedroom a retreat. My kitchen a space of nourishment and calm. And every time my phone buzzed, I reminded myself, this house was a declaration of my independence, not a communal playground. The emotional weight of 13 years of unrecognized labor finally settled into clarity. I had carried my family, covered for Amanda, sacrificed myself in subtle and obvious ways. But now, standing in my own home, I realized, I didn't owe them anything. Not respect, not attention, not free labor, not my presence. The house wasn't just an achievement, it was a boundary I could finally enforce. And for the first time, I felt ready for the confrontation I had always known would come. Because freedom isn't given, it's claimed. And tonight, I would begin to claim it fully. The weekend I finally moved into my house alone felt surreal. 3 months of silence had been enough to clear my head, enough to remember who I was outside of everyone else's expectations. Boxes were stacked neatly, furniture arranged just as I liked, and for the first time, the walls felt alive with my choices, not my compromises. I brewed coffee and walked barefoot across the floor, listening to the quiet hum of my fridge and the soft creak of the floorboards, thinking, this is what freedom sounds like. I had anticipated that the call would come eventually. Amanda, my parents, someone trying to guilt me back into the pattern. And, of course, it did. It started with texts. "Are you okay?" from Mom. "We need to talk," from Dad. And then Amanda's, sharp and cheerful all at once. "You kind of owe me a place. Remember summer camp?" The cold spread across my chest like ice. The same pattern, the same entitlement, the same expectation. Only this time, I refused to participate. I didn't respond. I didn't acknowledge the calls. I had learned that boundaries weren't about punishment, they were about self-preservation. 3 days later, I heard the knock. Loud. Fast. Relentless. My chest tightened, not with fear, but anticipation. I didn't rush. I took a deep breath, walked to the door, and opened it. Amanda was first, arms crossed like she was ready to prosecute me. Mom followed, careful but determined, her eyes flicking to the house like it belonged to her. Dad lingered in the background, jaw tight, disappointment worn like a badge of honor. "We need to talk," Amanda said before I could speak. "About what?" I asked calmly, stepping aside to let them enter. They walked into the living room as if it were still theirs. Mom adjusted a cushion on the couch. Amanda leaned against the wall, smirking. Dad folded his arms. They had come prepared to invade, and I had come prepared to defend. "You embarrassed us," Amanda began, her tone sharp, accusatory. By existing like this. I blinked, absorbing the absurdity of her statement. My problem, I said quietly, is that you don't understand boundaries. Amanda laughed lightly. You bought a small house and suddenly you're royalty? No, I said, stepping closer, holding my voice steady. I'm just claiming what I earned. This house is mine. Not yours. Not anyone else's. Mine. I reached for the desk drawer and pulled out a thick folder, dropping it onto the coffee table. Receipts, bank statements, spreadsheets, a detailed record of every penny I had spent, every dollar I had lent, every sacrifice I had made over 13 years. What's that? Dad asked, a frown creasing his forehead. Proof, I said simply. Proof of what it took to get here, proof of the work I did without anyone's help, proof that I am not responsible for anyone else's entitlement. Mom's hands trembled slightly. You're being cruel, she whispered. No, I said. I'm being clear. I'm being honest. And for the first time in my life, I am putting myself first. That is not cruelty. That is survival. Amanda's face went pale. She opened her mouth, then closed it, searching for something she couldn't find. Silence filled the room like thick fog. She had never seen this side of me, the side that wouldn't be manipulated, that wouldn't fold under expectation. I've kept quiet for 13 years, I said, my voice calm but firm. I've paid for mistakes, covered for failures, sacrificed my time, my health, my life. And now it ends. I am done being your safety net. Amanda's eyes flashed with anger, disbelief, confusion. But family, she protested, the word hanging in the air like a shield she thought could defend her. Family doesn't mean you get to take and never give, I said. Family doesn't mean exploiting someone's labor and calling it love. I have learned that. I have lived that. And now I choose me. Dad stepped forward slightly. Aileen. I held up a hand. No. This conversation isn't about approval. It isn't about forgiveness. It's about boundaries. And my boundary is clear. You do not live here, you do not control this space, and you do not dictate my life. I will not be guilted into being someone I am not anymore. The room fell silent. Amanda's mouth moved, trying to form words, but I could see the fight draining out of her. Mom's lips were pressed tightly, her face a mixture of hurt and incredulity. Dad's shoulders slumped slightly, the stance of a man who had underestimated the quiet strength of someone he thought would always comply. I walked to the window and pulled the curtains, letting the light spill in, washing over the space that was finally mine. I am done explaining. I am done apologizing. This is my house, my life, my choice. If you cannot respect that, then there is nothing more to say. Amanda turned and left first, slamming the door behind her with a force that shook the floorboards. Mom lingered, uncertain, then stepped out slowly, following. Dad paused at the threshold, looked back once, and left without a word. I closed the door gently behind me, but this time, there was no tremor of guilt in my chest. No instinct to apologize. No familiar pull to fix everything for everyone else. There was only quiet, solid, earned peace. I sank to the floor, back against the door, heart racing, hands trembling slightly, but for the first time, it was not fear. Not anxiety. Not guilt. It was clarity. And with that clarity came the realization that freedom, once claimed, cannot be taken away, no matter how loud the storm outside may be. The day after the confrontation, the house was quiet in a way that felt almost foreign, like stepping into a world where my choices mattered more than anyone else's expectations. The hum of the fridge, the creak of the floors, the soft sunlight spilling across the kitchen. These were small comforts I had never fully appreciated. 4 years, I had lived in a constant state of alert, bracing for someone else's needs, someone else's emergencies. Now, silence didn't demand anything from me. It invited me to breathe. And yet, the emotional aftershocks of the confrontation lingered. My phone buzzed intermittently, voicemails from Mom, texts from Dad, 3 frantic messages from Amanda, the last one punctuated with tears I could almost hear over the line. I didn't answer. For the first time, I understood the power of not responding, of letting their guilt, their panic, their manipulation unfold without me. Amanda's new boyfriend even called. I didn't recognize the number, but I knew immediately. She's really struggling, he said, voice careful, almost pleading. You don't have to punish her like this. I hung up. Not because I didn't care. Not because I hated her. But because her struggles were not my responsibility anymore. Days passed. No new emergencies. No sudden financial crises. No calls demanding attention, apologies, or free labor. And slowly, almost imperceptibly, a new rhythm settled into my life. Coffee before sunrise. A bike ride down quiet streets. Weekends free of explanations or justifications. I took my time unpacking, decorating, filling the rooms not with family needs but with things I loved. Books, art, plants, sunlight, and the rare luxury of doing absolutely nothing. One afternoon, while reorganizing the garage, I stumbled upon an old cardboard box I hadn't unpacked yet. Inside were photographs. Holidays, birthdays, family dinners, moments captured in time that from the outside looked happy. Almost every photo featured Amanda, smiling, held, praised. I paused, expecting to feel anger. Instead, I felt finished. I had been angry for years, but now, standing in the sunlight with dust motes dancing in the air, I felt something else. Closure. Then came the voicemail. Amanda's voice, softer this time. No edge, no entitlement. I just wanted you to know I'm staying with Mom and Dad. It's tight, but I'm figuring it out. I miss you. I held the phone in my hand, listening. My chest was steady. My heart wasn't racing. I didn't call back, not out of spite, but out of a newfound self-respect. For the first time, I realized that loving myself meant not reopening the door to the chaos that had defined my life for so long. Weeks turned into months. No emergencies. No calls demanding rent, groceries, or emotional labor. Amanda survived without free rent. My parents adjusted without my financial scaffolding. And I came back to life, slowly, deliberately. The spare room became a reading den, a sanctuary filled with sunlight and books. I bought a bike, rode it at sunrise, and even took weekends off without explaining myself to anyone. I scheduled a dental surgery I had postponed for years and paid cash. I booked a vacation without checking my phone every hour. And in the quiet, I began to understand a deeper truth. Freedom doesn't arrive with fireworks. It doesn't demand applause. It comes quietly, and you realize it only after you stop running someone else's life instead of your own. My mornings became predictable in the best way. Coffee, sunlight, silence. No dread, no guilt, no anticipation of another family emergency. The world didn't collapse without me managing it. And that realization was liberating. Then, one day, an email appeared in my inbox. Subject line, thank you. Not from my family, but from someone who had witnessed Amanda's entitlement from the outside. You probably don't remember me, it began. Amanda used to use me as a therapist. Watching you finally stand up to her helped me walk away, too. For the first time in years, I feel sane. I just wanted you to know, someone saw it. I laughed softly, a release I hadn't felt in years. Validation didn't erase the past, but it quieted the lies I had been told about my own worth. That night, I slept with the windows open. The house breathed. So did I. And for the first time in a very long time, I didn't wake up in the middle of the night calculating what I owed someone, what I should have done, or how I could fix another person's mistakes. I existed, fully and unapologetically, in my own life. When Amanda left another voicemail months later, quietly apologizing and expressing that she missed me, I listened once, and deleted it. Not cruelty. Not hatred. Self-love. Boundaries, I realized, weren't walls built to punish others. They were doors you close to hear yourself think. Love without respect is a leash. Family without boundaries is a cage. And peace is waking up in a house that owes nothing to anyone else. For weeks, I watched my life unfold like a slow sunrise. I stopped apologizing for rest, for quiet, for saying no. I learned that I didn't have to sacrifice myself to prove love, that being needed was not equivalent to being valued. And when I thought back to that Thanksgiving toast where my mother praised Amanda while I stood invisible, I smiled quietly. They thought they were celebrating the wrong person. But in truth, I had always been the one holding the crumbling walls together. And now, for the first time, I could finally let them crumble without guilt. The months that followed the confrontation were quiet, but not empty. They were full of small victories, subtle freedoms, and the kind of peace that grows slowly, like roots taking hold beneath the soil. I had learned to enjoy the mundane. Mornings with coffee and the soft sunlight spilling across the kitchen floor, afternoons rearranging furniture or planting flowers on the porch, evenings reading without interruption, without expectation, without apology. I noticed the difference immediately. My body relaxed, my thoughts slowed, and my energy returned. I could work without exhaustion gnawing at my mind. I could sleep through the night without dreaming of someone else's emergencies. The house, once just 4 walls and a roof, had become a sanctuary, a physical manifestation of all the work I had poured into my life, and all the boundaries I had finally enforced. Then came the small gestures that reminded me I had truly reclaimed my life. I painted the spare room a soft shade of teal, filled it with books and candles, and placed a chair by the window where sunlight pooled in every afternoon. I bought a bicycle and rode at dawn, feeling the wind on my face and the thrill of movement without purpose other than joy. I scheduled appointments I had postponed for years. Dentist visits, routine checkups, even a weekend getaway. All paid for by me, all for me. Every choice was mine. I thought back to the emails and calls I had received from people outside my family. People who had witnessed Amanda's entitlement. People who had recognized my exhaustion and my strength. One email in particular stayed with me. Sarah, a friend Amanda had used as a therapist, had written, "Watching you finally stand up to her helped me walk away, too. I feel sane for the first time in years." Someone finally saw it. I smiled softly as I reread it. Validation doesn't erase the past, but it quietly confirms your worth, and in that quiet, I felt stronger than I had ever felt before. Amanda called again, months later. Her voice was quieter, stripped of its usual entitlement. "I just wanted you to know I'm staying with Mom and Dad. It's tight, but I'm figuring it out. I miss you." I listened once and didn't respond. Not out of anger, not out of malice. Out of self-respect. Out of knowing that loving myself sometimes means letting go. Life went on. My parents, too, adjusted. They stopped expecting me to solve problems I had no responsibility for. Mom sent a few polite texts, Dad a few short messages, but the tone had changed. It was no longer expectation or accusation. It was observation, almost distant. And I welcomed it. Because my life, my home, my peace, no longer depended on their approval. I spent afternoons tending to my little garden, evenings curled up with a book in the spare room, mornings on my bike, watching the sunrise paint the sky pink and gold. I cooked meals for myself, cleaned when I wanted to, and slept without fear of interruption. Every day, the small freedoms accumulated, like a ledger finally balanced in my favor. One day, I found myself looking at the old photos I had unpacked months ago. Holidays, birthdays, moments of Amanda's laughter, my own face often just off to the side. But now, I didn't feel anger, envy, or sorrow. I felt closure. Those years had been difficult, yes, but they had forged the strength I now carried. I had endured, survived, and ultimately reclaimed my life. I realized that the house was more than walls and a roof. It was a manifestation of everything I had earned, 13 years of work, sacrifice, patience, and resilience. It was a symbol of autonomy, a space where I could finally live free, without guilt, without obligation. And in that freedom, I discovered something beautiful. Life could be soft, quiet, and still incredibly rich. I could savor mornings with coffee, evenings with music, weekends without explanation. I could exist without being needed, without being measured, without being exploited. One evening, I stood barefoot in the kitchen, the sunlight fading into soft gold. The house hummed around me, familiar and alive. I felt a rare, profound gratitude, not for the material possession, not even for the escape from my family's patterns, but for my own courage, my own perseverance, my own boundaries. This house was mine, and so was my life. And for the first time, the silence wasn't empty. It was full of possibility, full of quiet triumph, full of a peace I had never known before. Sometimes, I think back to that Thanksgiving toast, to Amanda being praised while I stood invisible. They believed they were celebrating the wrong person. But in truth, they had been blind to who had held everything together all along. And now, with the house, with boundaries, with self-respect, I finally had the life I had built for myself. Not theirs, not borrowed, not conditional. Finally, completely, entirely my own. And that, I realized as I closed my eyes that night, feeling the soft hum of the house around me, was freedom.